even though in the relative there are polarities, there's just ultimately this unified stillness, vibrating richness, no matter what happens. There's absolutely no differentiation. You know, if something can still shake you, in a way you're not done. If you are still suffering, there is integration to be done. Do not deny anything. Carry on. And suffering will only end at the point where everything is made of the same luminous, beautiful, vibrating, empty substance. And there's no difference between you and another person, no difference between you and a tree. It's almost like that last bit of suffering hangs on for dear life until the moment where everything just flattens out and everything is exactly the same. Level playing field, same substance, no borders. And it's this playful practice of integration that takes place. And eventually all you're left with is this one substance. And no matter what arises, it's all the same. Everything's equally accepted. There's nothing that is left out or unfavorable or denied, because you're just yourself facing more of yourself. So you can't wait to gain something in the future. You can't wait to gain something from the outside. All you can do is remove what you're not, so that what you've always been stands out.
You're listening to the Nonduality podcast. This is Nic Higham from nisargayoga.com. Today I'm joined again by Colette Davie. Colette's Instagram handle is That Beyond Duality. The sense of self, the ego, consists of two forces, two energies of desire and fear. So desire meaning what I seek, that would complete me eventually, and fear being what I avoid, that would destroy me. And the ego is based on the perception of time and separation. I need time in order to be whole, because I'm separate from what I desire that would make me whole. Desire seeks completion or the wholeness of life, and fear attempts to avoid death ultimately. Each ego has a unique desire-fear structure, and it determines our pseudo sense of self, our seeking journey, our suffering, and this seems to dualize or fragment experience.
Yes, and both fear and desire place you into the future, an avoidance of the present. A fear is an anticipation of an undesirable outcome, and a desire is some sort of projection of a desirable outcome in the future, both of which keep us just out of the now and projecting forward, so that we're never faced with what we are at this moment, and the fact that there is no fear here now, and that there is no desire here now. Fear is always forward, desire is always forward. And it's a very tricky and very clever mechanism, because as long as we keep just on the edge of the future, we just miss the inherent fulfillment that's here. It's like a set of conditions that have been somehow imposed onto this experience through a life of a human, where these sort of snapshots are taken of favorable and unfavorable events, what led to them, what was happening underneath, behind the scenes, and that creates lots of little identities that then, going forward, avoid similar situations or pursue similar situations, and that creates a pattern and then perpetuates this outward movement into these polarities instead of an inward movement back into yourself. And that's why we really need to run it completely, flat. We need to pursue everything, it seems, before we realize, oh, wait, I can't find happiness outside. This is not working. I've done everything I wanted to do. all my worst fears have come true and I'm a mess and nothing's working. There's only one thing left, that you only have one path left, and that's inward.
Absolutely. Fulfillment comes from the nature of self in all its characteristics or qualities, like peace, love, contentment, joy, safety, wholeness. And when we overlook them, we end up seeking artificial versions of them in the future, in external things.
The external world can only give us polarity. If we seek anything externally, we will either be faced with a negative or a positive outcome. And so that's exactly this fear versus desire thing as well. They're kind of two opposites, and that's the world. That's the world of duality. That is the external manifest world. It's all that will ever give you until you look inward and you see this thing that is not polarized, that cannot be fearful or filled with desire. And that's where that still point is. And you need to go inward before you can turn back outward and see that there's actually no polarity in the dualistic world either.
So, for example, in overlooking connection, we seek intimacy. Intimacy points to connection, but doesn't quite get there. Even when you're in a moment of intimacy, there's always that loneliness lurking around the corner. Again, another example, bliss is already here. Bliss is the nature of self. And in overlooking the bliss already here, the unconditional bliss of what we are, we seek pleasurable experiences, maybe through addiction or some other way. And on the back of pleasure is pain, and this merry-go-round of the facets of ego defined by pleasure and pain in that fear, desire, journey and sense of self. Bliss is already here. When you're experiencing a moment of satisfaction, dissatisfaction's always there as this kind of lurking shadow, and that takes our attention and it pulls us away from this inherent contentment of self, contentment being another quality of self. We somehow forget about this, forget about that love, contentment. They are the truth of what you are. They're unconditional. They're not in time and space. So we find them with a heart of curiosity and love and openness rather than as an ego through lack. Take the desire security and the fear insecurity. Security is like a few steps away from the truth of safety. Like it hints at something so true, so real, yet there's still this conditionality attached to it. I need to put security systems in place to be safe. In truth, safety is already here, and it's remembering that. And of course, on the back of security, we feel insecure in duality because that's the nature of this polarized experience. Each ego has this kind of constellation of these distortions. These distortions also point to a unique assortment of the qualities. And it's only a matter of refining those distortions and remembering who you are, what you are. They are now. They're not at the end of a seeking journey. They are fully accessible.
That's also why self-inquiry is so important, especially initially on the path, because you're faced with these really strong emotions and reactions to situations, and eventually you need to sit down and you need to ask, what was it that underlay my reaction or underlay my emotion? What's the core here? What am I missing? What is it why did I lash out? Why did I lash out? And you go through all these layers of distortion. At first it starts, I lashed out because that person was mean to me. And then you're like, no, it can't be. Then you move to, okay, I lashed out because I was in a bad mood that day. And slowly the distortions start to fall away. And eventually you reach this conclusion of, I lashed out because I didn't feel safe. I lashed out because I felt like I was missing something. And it puts you face to face with this quality that you feel you lack or that you feel is missing. And then you use that and you ask, but is that which is aware of my experience, or is the existence that is here, or the beingness, is it lacking this thing, or is it experiencing it? So through self-inquiry, we just shed all those layers and we get to this base core problem. And often its polarity is present in our true nature. Negative emotions and negative experiences are not negative, they're intuitions. They are deeply felt intuitions that something is not being recognized. There comes a point where you need to go into the body and you need to let these characteristics that you've discovered about your true nature seep into the sensations where these things are held so deeply. It's like when something negative gets reinforced again and again, it starts mentally, and over time it almost gets built into a contraction in the body that can still exist post self-realization, and that's where the body aspect comes in. So it's a mind and a body, a paradox, because you're neither, but both of these things need to be aligned. So it's like a yoga. And it can also only be done in this very curious, spontaneous, like a scientist would look at something under a microscope. You look at these like tense sensations and you realize, oh my goodness, there's no thought happening right now, but my throat is holding embarrassment. It feels like my throat is holding despair. And if you neglect that, it's going to still sort of like bubble under the surface. And so it's a mind and body balance. It's a mind and body exploration. It starts with, I am anxious. Then there is anxiety. Then I am the witness of anxiety. Then it's not anxiety. And then you're in this total neutrality, this beautiful, stable, amidst the chaos, anything can happen. And it doesn't matter whether the body experiences what was once called anxiety, because it's completely reframed. The framework or the perceptual lens is totally different. The anxiety symptoms are equal to the sensation of the sole of your feet or the movement of trees outside. Very good practice is to identify some sort of quality of true nature, like awareness, or the feeling of I am here, or the feeling of existence, and also look for the anxiety there. It immediately takes you a step back. Even if you're super in it, even if you're so absorbed, even just a degree of separation can be super beneficial. In those cases, even when it feels impossible, it's very important that you don't look for this thing that's not anxious externally. The hint here is that it's you. There's a quality of you right now that's not anxious. And because the teaching always says, find that which is looking, or find that which is not depressed, or find that which is detached, we still look on the outside. We're like looking for it as if it's going to show up when it's already here. There's something right here, right now, that is not anxious. Notice it. It is here. It's a fact. If you can't see it, you're not looking. And the practice of taking a neutral sensation and weighing it up against a very conditioned sensation. I used to do that a lot. I started with the feeling in my throat or in my chest when I was very upset. I used to go to the sole of my feet. Then I used to come back to my chest and my throat and back to the sole of my feet. And I used to ask myself, what's the difference? What is the difference between these two? And the more you ask that, the more you realize that there's no difference. The one is just distorted, but they are both sensation. They're made of the exact same thing. And the one might not even be that much more intense than the other. It's just that thought has morphed it into something with all these associations.
Exactly. So when all of these energies are seen as neutral, impersonal, then there can be a shift into something new. All of this becomes a sort of celebration. All of this becomes a sort of playground, this unique opportunity to explore the fullness of life. So no longer do we cut off or try to deny or try to fight experiences or sensations. We see it as this kind of rich banquet of possibility in this infinite life that we are. And no longer is anything a threat. No longer is anything not what we are. It's all what we are.
There's absolutely no differentiation. And even though in the relative there are polarities, there's just ultimately this unified stillness, vibrating richness, no matter what happens. You know, if something can still shake you, in a way you're not done. In a way, I think Buddha said, like I've said before, Buddha said, I teach the end of suffering. And that should be the truth for your experience. Do not deny anything. If you are still suffering, there is integration to be done. And of course not by you, but it's the best we can do with language. If the end of suffering is not your experience, carry on. And suffering will only end at this point, at the point where everything is made of the same luminous, beautiful, vibrating, empty substance. And there's no difference between you and another person, no difference between you and a tree. It's almost like that last bit of suffering hangs on for dear life until the moment where everything just flattens out and everything is exactly the same. Level playing field, same substance, no borders.
And yet it's not a bland nothingness. It is all the same, and it's known to be all the same. Yet, as I say, there's this kind of celebration of all the infinite ways in which that sameness can appear. It's like that Zen saying, before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. After a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains and waters are no longer waters. After enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and waters are once again waters. You realize, how can a mountain be a mountain? You see past that label and you go, no way, that can't be a mountain. How did I ever believe that it's a mountain? It's only this one life appearing that way. Through integration, it's almost like life is permitted to appear as a mountain, but you just know that's not all it is. Like it is, and it's not. So it's both and.
It's the difference between negating something and accepting at the same time as the negation. So now, you can say you're a person, but you're not just a person. And before you had to deny the person, you had to say, no, I'm not a person. So that your true nature could shine forth. And then when it's shone enough, you're like, oh, I'm a person too. And that's a full circle. You pick up everything you dropped. And this experience is the most magnificent experience, but it is also the most ordinary. It's mystical, but it's mundane.
There's something very special about the mystical and the mundane. Because if it's only just mystical, then it's like you're so blissed out that you don't even experience the bliss. You're killed with the bliss. But if it can be mundane as well, it's like the mundane starts to take on a blissful appearance. And that's amazing. Because this could have been nothingness. This could have been just empty void. But look at it. It's so rich and full. The mundane is so sacred in a way, so divine, actually. And it feels like an opportunity to kind of explore yourself this way through duality. Who knows what other manifestations of the one life are appearing right now. But this is somehow quite profound.
The line between the mundane and the divine begins to blur, and then there's no longer a distinction. You can have the most mystical experiences. Jesus can show up in your room, or you can look at a tree. It's the same. There's no longer a pursuit for either, You don't want a super spiritual, blissed out, psychedelic experience, because it's exactly the same as a calm state of mind with balance, sitting on a park bench. And that's exactly that state of non-polarity. That's that framework in which all of these things can occur, but yet remains completely one thing, stable, with one sort of reference point for everything. And it's not limited.
And this integration can seem to take some time, as Rupert Spira says, although it takes only a moment to see that we are clear space of aware presence, it takes time for the body and the mind to become realigned with this experiential understanding. And so it can seem as if some work or some inquiry is required to elicit these distortions in experience, as we've been exploring, and to reintegrate them into the truth of what they are, truth of what you are.
Yeah, and it's not enough to say, I've recognized myself as awareness, but I don't exist as a person, so therefore there's no integration work to do. If you're still saying there's no person here, therefore no effort is needed, do the effort. If there's any type of conceptual layover there, you should still be doing yoga meditations. You should still be sitting. Whether or not there's a person there is irrelevant. There's integration that needs to be willed to happen. And we play with this illusion of a person doing effort because that is the way it seems to take place. That's the way that this integration seems to happen. But it isn't, but it is. So just in the same way that it appears to take time, when we're actually entirely timeless, and it's always the same now, there's no time passing, yet it appears to take time to integrate. It's exactly the same. There's no person here, but it appears as though it requires effort from this person. It's illusion, but in a way it's necessary. Time and effort. Until it's seen through and through that there is no time, and it never required effort.
Absolutely. In a way, time is its own sort of contraction, the sense of time. And that sense of time can form a particular facet of the ego. So what do you know of time right now? So you look at the clock, do you find time there? Which bit of the clock is time? Now, all you see is this shape, the ticking hand. You don't find time there. So what do you know of time? You may even experience time as an image, a sensation. We'll delve into those as well and see if you can find time. Where do you find this time thing? It may appear as an anxiety. Oh, I'm running out of time. Oh, I don't have enough time. Delve into those stories. See what the essence, the nature of those are too. Anything will do. Nothing is out of the question. Really, that's the process. Just bringing it all into a space of awareness into what you are and being open-hearted and curious, asking, what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? What is it really? I know what I think it is, but what is it really? What do you really know of anything?
I think I've heard Paul Hedderman use an analogy similar to throwing a whole lot of balls at one baseball glove, and then one day the glove will catch one of those balls, regardless of where the glove is placed. So, in a way, do everything you can. Use whatever doorway you can. And then all it takes is one. And then it's like it just goes by itself.
and use whatever is in your present experience. And even if that is the darkest, most undesirable thing, this shame, this sense of guilt, whatever it is, a seemingly impure emotion or thought, explore that too. What is that really? We're not looking for a new narrative, we're just looking for the truth of what it is. If you put your hand or dip your toes into this substance called shame, do you find shame? Do you really find shame? It's like you dip your hand into a bath of water, and if you just close your eyes and feel the sensation of the water, do you find water in the sensation? Do you find water in the image of the water? What about the sound? Do you find water in the sound of the water flowing from the tap? So where's the water? You don't ever find the water. And it's the same. You dip your hand into this pool of shame or the pool of anxiety, the pool of fear. You don't find those things. You only find the very raw, undefined energy of experience. And so that effortlessly negates any of those labels, any of those defined things, those objects that seem to define you. And it's not like you're left with nothing. Those things, that fear, or that anxiety, or whatever it is seen for what it is. Like you don't really know what water is. Like you think you know what water is, but you don't, and you never find it. But you do find something very definite, pure subjectivity without an object. It's very palpable positivity. It's not nothingness.
Rupert Spira teaches his students to do a practice where they perceive the world briefly as an infant would perceive the world. So if you do that and you just close your eyes, what do you know of a body? You haven't been told anything about a body. You're just born. What do you know of thought? What do you know of a person in a room? All you feel is sensation. And you can't even label it that. There's just this vibrating something. And it has no form either. It's just through conditioning that we've been taught that sensations correlate with a part of the body. If you do this practice and you close your eyes, the sensation of the hand has no shape and it has no size. And you don't know anything of hand. And eventually the entire spectrum of experience becomes like that. Like you said with the water. What do you know of water? You see an image. An image of water is just as much an image as an image of a tree. And the thing that differentiates those two is a thought, ephemeral, coming and going, doesn't even stay long enough to be concrete. How can you call it water? How can it exist if it's just here as a thought of water and then gone? But yet you're still faced with this object, this tangible existence here long after the thought water has disappeared.
Yeah. It's like if you look at a movie screen and on the screen you see a tree and you see a river. If you take a magnifying glass and zoom in, take a closer look, you find like pixels of colour, maybe even electricity, dancing, moving, all of the same nature. And that's the same with anything. Or you could say light. All you find is light. You are the light of awareness, illuminating the known. And the known turns out to be made of light too. So in some sense, you know yourself to be apart from what you see. But upon closer investigation, you find that what you see is of your nature, is light only. All that stuff you felt was not allowed in awareness is absolutely made of awareness. It's made of the pixels, you could say, of awareness. And that goes for the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly. And it's always like that. And so that is, again, part of the integration, because you see the nature of it all. And that's not something that requires effort. It's only a seeing, it's only a noticing.
Yes, it's again a reduction of distortion. So you go from seeing water, to seeing an image, to seeing, to knowing, because what is seeing without knowing? And sounds as well. You go from the sound of a bird to a sound, to the knowing of a sound, to knowing. And it's this reduction of all these perceptions down to the same knowing quality. And it's this playful practice of integration that takes place. And eventually all you're left with is this one substance. And no matter what arises, it's all the same. Everything's equally accepted. There's nothing that is left out or unfavorable or denied, because you're just yourself facing more of yourself.
Yeah, so you reduce it all down, you simmer it all down to its one substance, and that is irreducible, irrefutable, undefinable, but absolutely what you are, what all is.
Yeah, you reduce it down till you can't anymore, because there's nothing left to work with. I mean, what can this be reduced down to? It's barely tangible. It's incomprehensible. It's out of the realm of the mind. There's no more concept left to reduce. And this is again the same pattern as what we spoke about earlier, where you reduce desire and you reduce fear down to the core of, say, contentment, or you reduce lack down to the core messenger. You reduce prosperity down to the core, and abundance is revealed. So it's the shedding of layers. Yeah, it's like as soon as that edge of the separate thing is removed, it's no longer like this war, like trying to change experience. You're simply investigating experience. There's no longer like a will to change it or to like resist it, or you want to have a spiritual experience. It's simply a yearning to see underneath the layers, which happens naturally without a separate thing there. Completely playful, spontaneous, as is the nature of your true self. Playful, spontaneous, creative infinity. That's what you are. You are a child almost. It is almost childlike in nature.
Nisargadatta says, detach from all that makes your mind restless. He says, you can start only from where you are. You must ask with an undivided heart and live an integrated life. A day comes when you have amassed enough and you must begin to build. Then sorting out and discarding are absolutely necessary. Everything must be scrutinized and the unnecessary ruthlessly destroyed. And it seems like this is a sort of like deconstructive process, a process of elimination, or, as we've been saying, refinement, or reducing down aspects of experience to the truth that can't be denied. But actually, in the process, the result is this abundant isness of life. And that was always here. Apparently locked away, apparently distorted, obscured. So yeah, first of all, it could be this sort of ruthless scrutiny and delabeling or peeling back all the layers, but eventually what's left is this fullness of life.
Adyashanti said, enlightenment is a destructive process. It's not a process of becoming. It's a process of revealing. Like we've spoken about, it's a process of shedding layers rather than adding onto yourself. The removal of what has been wrongly or mistakenly added. The shedding of illusion instead of the adding of something divine. So you can't wait to gain something in the future. You can't wait to gain something from the outside. All you can do is remove what you're not, so that what you've always been stands out